In this video we're going to build a little exchange rate calculator using JavaScript. So there's a PDF if you've got access to files to follow along, and the idea being that we can just enter a value in pounds, in sterling, and we'll convert it, and it will draw out some information, some examples of using the DOM, how you work with forms, how events work with forms, and also the way that data types can be manipulated in JavaScript. Okay, so I've got Visual Studio Code set up. I've got this exchange rate page, and this has got a very simple form in it. Here we've got a HTML form, and the form has got an ID, and it's got an input type there, a text input type of ID pounds, and there's a little paragraph with an ID of MSG, just short for message there. So the idea is that the user will enter a value in pounds. I'll hit the submit button, and we'll use this paragraph here to display information back to them. Might be an error message, but hopefully it'll be the results of the calculation. So first things first, what we'll need to do is we're going to set this up as an external file. So I'm going to, in this JS folder that I've created in my little file structure, I'm going to create a new file in there which I'll call exchange.js. So it's an empty file at the moment, so I'm going to use the concept of an immediately invoked function expression. This is just good practice to stop you from doing what's known as polluting the global scope. So the way this works is I'll put make it a little bit bigger for you. I'll put a function in there, and I'll wrap that function in parentheses, in normal brackets, and I'll put a function call at the end like so. Okay, so we'll start our code here, and we'll end our code there. So everything that we'll do we'll place inside of that. Let's start off as is traditional by putting a little console in there. So we'll just say hello. Just save that. So I've got an extension called Prettier installed, which is why when I save it, you see it is formatting it like so. So you might want to get that installed. It's a nice extension for automatically formatting your code. Right, so that's saved. Let's go back to here, and I need to load that script file in. So I'm going to use the technique. If you look at previous movies, you'll see there's numerous different techniques here, but the technique I'm going to use is to load the script in before the closing body. By doing it that way, I don't need to have any kind of event waiting for the DOM or this HTML to load. It'll have understood that the DOM has loaded at that point. So we'll type script, if we do :src in Visual Studio Code and then hit tab, it'll automatically put the source in as an attribute. That's what we want it to do. And then we'll say JS exchange.js. Right, so I'll save that. Go back to my browser and right click and inspect. There's my console. Let's just refresh now, and we should get hello, which is good. And we can also, so we know that that's connected to the external file. The other thing that we could have done is gone to network, clicked on JS, and we can see the file is being found there. If the file was not there, so if we had made a silly little typo like that, you'd see that we would get a 404 there because it can't find the file. Okay, so watch out for that. Do make sure that the script file has been loaded properly, otherwise none of your code's going to actually work. Right, so we're good to go. So we're going to need a number of variables for our little application here. So inside of here, let's declare some variables. So let's put declare variables. Now, in JavaScript, over the years, we've had a number of different techniques to declare variables. The most tried and tested way is to use the var keyword. And so I'm going to create price pounds. So the var keyword declares a variable. That variable has what's known as function scope. So it will exist inside of this function and any other functions that are created below it. with something called ES6, there is a new type of function declaration called a let, which has what's known as block scope, so the variables only exist within the curly braces. But for our purposes, a var is the best way to go. You might find some old code out there where people don't declare variables with a var. That's bad practice, though the browsers might let you off, but you should really declare your variables with either var or let and use var. So obviously we're going to need a price in pounds. We're also going to need an exchange rate variable, and we are also going to need a price in euros. So there's our three variables declared. Now, in terms of inputs from our application, we want the user to be able to type something in here and receive that value. And we then want to be able to respond to them in some way, so we want an output. Now, controlling the input will really be this HTML form, because this is what we want to trap the submission from. So notice that form has got an ID of my form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create so this is my form input. So I'm going to create a variable that I'm going to call var, and we'll call this convert form. So we'll say convert form, and we'll set this equal to document dot get element by ID, and then what was it called? Forgotten already. It was called my form. So I'm using get element by ID to retrieve that element from the DOM, from the HTML, and just storing it in a variable, and that way I won't have to type this every time. That's our input, and we want some kind of output. So our output is going to be this paragraph tag here, which I've set up with an ID of MSG, just short for message. So we'll say this is var MSG, and we'll say that this is document dot get element by ID again, and I think I can remember it this time. It was MSG for message. Okay, so that's going to be our input, and that's going to be our output. Right, so the next thing that we need to then do is to handle the form submission, and this is where we get into events in JavaScript. So have a look at a previous video that I did talking about events if you're new to these. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to do this in a nice structured way. So let's capture the form input. So what we're going to do is we'll say convert form dot, and we'll use this thing here called add event listener, and that is going to add a listener to that form. So what we're doing is we're setting up an event that we want to listen out for, and when that event occurs, we'll trigger a function known as an event handler. Now the type of event that we want is what's known as a submit. So when a form is submitted, when a submit button on a form is pressed, in JavaScript world, that is what's known as a submit event. And the second parameter here is going to be the function that handles the result of that event. So I'll type function, and I'll put in parenthesis. So it's a bit an irritating there. I'll show you a little bit clearer. Leave that there. So we've got a function. Sorry, there's a function. There's a curly brace. Curly brace. Let's see, you've got an entire function being dropped in as the second parameter. You can do this other ways, but that's why I'll do it in this example. So that parenthesis there, that normal bracket you like, but the proper name for these is a parenthesis, matches with this one here. Okay, you see Visual Studio Code shows me that, and it shows me that that one ends that. So if you wanted to, that ends the form capture. Right, so now what I would traditionally do with an event is just make sure it is actually being captured. So let's just do a little console form submitted, and I'll save that. Now this is going to not quite behave as you might have expected, because you're going to expect to see that message appears. But let's have a look, see what happens. So I'll just refresh my page and I'll hit my button here to submit my form, and what we're expecting over here is to see that message, but just have a look what happens. We don't see it. Okay, and I'm not seeing it here, but you might see a slight flicker over there, but certainly I'm seeing a flicker effect, which is implying that the page is reloading. So what's going on here is that basically a HTML form has a default method of get, and it has a default action of nothing. That means that it sends the information from this form back to itself using the HTTP method of get. And there's the default value, so I didn't actually need to put those in. So I'm not going to put them in, I'll leave them. So I don't need them. But that's the default behavior. The default behavior is to submit that form. Now the nice thing about JavaScript events and these functions here, which are known as event handlers, so this function is going to handle that event. Now the nice thing about these functions is that they receive as a parameter that you can choose to expose if you need it, the event object itself. So in here I can type in EV. So that's a convention I use. Lots of developers might use EV or EVT or event. It's entirely up to you. But what it does is it allows us to expose the event. The event object then is now available, and that has various properties and methods, and the one I want is listed at the top there. It's what's known as prevent default. So it's a method. Notice we've got the parenthesis at the end, so that means it's a doing word. We've got verb noun, as it were, and what that is going to do is going to stop the default behavior of the form, which we've just seen is to submit the form and in this case refresh the page. So that's going to stop that from happening now, which would mean we'll have the opportunity to get this console displayed. And as we take our logic forward, it means we'll have the opportunity to build all our logic up in here. Right, so let's go back to our page and refresh. So we'll put a value in here again and convert, and you see we get the message. Great. Okay, so dead handy that. You see that used a lot in applications, the ability to step in and stop a form from being submitted by using event prevent default. Really common use cases on form validation where the form is paused and the logic checks to see if form values are appropriate to what is required. You've seen that 100 times when you fill out forms online. And that's the technique that's used to stop the form from submitting. So now we've got the form submitting and we've captured it, we've stopped it from refreshing the page. Let's retrieve the value from the form itself. So in our form, we handily gave this input type an ID of pounds. So what that means that we're going to be able to do is we'll be able to say that price pounds, remember we declared that up here, is going to be equal to document dot get element by ID pounds. So that is referencing this ID in the DOM, and we'll then use the property of value. Okay, so we've now, so this will be equal to whatever is submitted in the form. So let's just have a nosy at that. So we'll put that in our console here. And let's give that a whirl. Right, notice that because this was declared with a var, even though I'm in another curly brace here, it's perfectly fine because vars have function scope, which means it's available anywhere within this function. Right, let's give that a go. Let's refresh. We'll put our value in up here, 12, and there we get our value back in the console of 12. Okay, now there's a slight issue here because what I could then proceed to do is do the calculation, which is fine. So what we might then decide to do is, for example, we could set euros up here. Initially it's been 0, and we could set exchange rate up here to be initially, let's say I'll just make a value up at 0.87, and then down here we could say that price euros is going to be equal to price pounds multiplied by exchange rate. Just a simple bit of maths, and then we could send that back to the DOM, because we could then say that message, which remember is our DOM element here, we could say that message is equal to price euros. Okay, so this is a very rough version. We're going to have to refine this a fair amount, but we are taking the input value and we're going to take that value multiplied by exchange rate to give us a price in euros and then put it back into the message. Right, so without any further knowledge of what JavaScript will do, that may seem as if it would work, so let's give it a go. 12. Oh, and we're not getting, oh, because, sorry, that should be, we should say message.inner HTML, set the inner value, because that finds the DOM element and we need to set the inner value. Right, let's try that again. Let's refresh, so put 12 in here, and you see we get a value back. So that does appear as if it's worked, which is great. Now, put different values in, so it does seem to be working. Now, there's a number of issues with this though. First of all, what happened if we did this? So if I type in £10, which the user is able to do, because we haven't really got any fancy validation on there, and I convert that, we get this NAN, and that is not a number. So we want to stop that from happening, because that's obviously a string. Now, I'll just prove to you another actual issue with this. If I convert that, now if I go to sources up here, and I can find my exchange rate, there's a debugger in here, and I'm just going to put a breakpoint in here and just refresh. I'll type in a value in here again. If I go over to here, I can see that the price euros is, sorry, the price pounds up here is 23. You see that's in quotes, so that's actually a string. Now, when you send a value from a form, it's inputted as a string value, and that's not necessarily what you want, particularly in this case where you want to do some math against that. Now, JavaScript's actually quite good, because it's actually, when we multiply it by this value down here, it's let us get away with that initial value. But what we should really do is we should convert that from a string to a suitable data type, in this case a float. So let's get rid of that. So what we should really do up here is this, we could wrap, and we could wrap this in a function, and I'm going to wrap it in something called parse float, and that will convert that into a float, a number, a decimal place. And we also have, if you're interested, there is parse int to convert to integers, a parse float, there's loads of them, so I should have brought these up. So let's say parse int, so there you go, there's parse int, but there are others. So W3 Schools probably give us a quick little list, do they? Yeah, there's parse float, you see, that we can use as well. That's one that we're currently using. And string can be used to convert to a string if you want to go that route. So what does that actually do? It's going to convert that to a float, but what if it can't? Now if it can't, it's going to return that as not a number, as nan, N-A-N. So what we should really do then is only do this calculation if we have a valid number. So we could use a if condition, because there is a method called isNan. So we could therefore say if isNan price pounds. So we're checking to see if price pounds is not a number, and if that's the case, maybe what we'll do is we'll say that our message gets an error instead. So we'll say inner HTML equals you must enter a number. And we've got a CSS class set up in the file structure. So in the CSS, in here, we've got a little error class set up. So I'm going to add that to the message as well. So we can use set attribute to do that. So we'll say add the class of error. Right, so if it's not a number, do that, and then we could say else. And we'll put these inside of there. So we've got this else condition. Right, let's try that now. So we'll go back to here. Let's refresh. So somebody types in £10, and we say he gets, you must enter a number, because that's not a number, that's none. But if they put in 10, we'll do the conversion. Now notice, because I got an error, it's putting that in red. So what I should really do is, if we've not got an error, we'll say to the message that will remove the attribute of class. That would remove the error class that we added there. So that's in case they get it right the second time. So let's try again. £10. Let's just show you down here. There's the message. So submit. Oh, sorry, I need to be in here. There's the message is in here. Let's just refresh, start again. I'll just find this in the DOM, then you can see it changing as we make these changes. So there's the paragraph tag. So we'll say £10. So watch what happens up here. It puts the class of error in, and obviously it puts a little message in the inner HTML. But if they put in a valid value, it gets rid of that and puts the value in. Okay, now I might also want to capture another scenario, because what if they entered 0? I'm going to put 0 in, they're going to get 0, but perhaps we should give them a little message there as well. So I'm going to put a nested if statement in. So we'll say if price pounds equals 0. So that's a equality and data type check. Open up the curlies. Let's just put an else in first of all before we go any further, and put all of that in an else. So if they enter 0, what we'll do is we'll put this same message in place, that they must enter a number, not 0, so they know it's that error message. And again, we'll set the class to error. Okay, so we've got another possible capture if the user does something silly. So if they put 0 in, you must enter 0. So we get the appropriate error message. Now when it does work, you get that. Let's actually add the euro character to this, which is what this is going to do here. So we could make this a string. So you will get, and then this is what's known as a HTML entity. So that is equal to the proper euro character, and then we'll concatenate the price in there. So the plus is a concatenation character with strings in JavaScript, so we're gluing that string to that, which I know is a number, but it will convert it to a string in order to add it into here. And we also want to just do this to 2 decimal places. So after we've done the maths there, we'll say price euros equals price euros dot to fixed, and how many decimal places? 2. Okay, right, let's go back, let's refresh. So we put in a number that's likely to require decimal places, and we get that as the euro coming from the HTML entity. Right, okay, so that's the fundamentals of a quick application. One last thing that's in the PDF is we could add another event. So because if, let's say, our user get things wrong, and they click back in here, perhaps we could reset that for them. So this just gives me an excuse to show you another event. So all of that was inside of the capture event. So I can collapse that down. So I'm then going to add in, you'll see that we were end capture form there. So let's add another one in. So this is reset on focus event. So I'm going to add another event. So we'll say that what we want to happen is when the user clicks in that pounds field here, we want to reset it to just be blank. So we'll say document dot get element by ID pounds. We could have created that as a variable, given we used it twice now. And then we'll say add event listener, and the event I'm going to use here is what's known as a focus event. So with form fields, when you focus on something, it's when you click inside it. A blur is the opposite, so when you click out of it, that's a blur event. But we want a focus event, i.e. that when we click in here, it's got the focus, that's the event. So the second parameter will be a function. So we could type in function, you put your parenthesis in there and your curly brace, like so. So you see there's an entire function there as a parameter. And what we'll do, what we could do is we could say document get element by ID pounds, and we could say value equals an empty string. Right, so let's try that. So we'll refresh, type something in there, and then click in here. It's going to clear that now. Maybe we'll clear the error message as well. So we could use, we've already seen how we can do that, because we could remove the class that's got the error message on it, and we could also remove the inner HTML value, just set it back to blank. So now let's refresh, make a mistake, we click back in, it clears out to give them another go. Right, now one last thing about this, which is going to draw out, is that repetition there is always a bit of a worry in an application. Now we know what the event was triggered on, so you can actually use what's known as the this keyword. So instead of that, I could have actually said this, and this refers to the current object, and we could have done it like that. So that will work exactly the same. So you will see some developers use that technique. See, it's worked exactly the same. And the other technique, which is probably the preferred one, is that we know what the event is. So again, we can expose the event, and then we could say event.target, that was the target of the event, value equals nothing. So both of those will actually work. Let's refresh, hit that, and click in there, and it clears. Now, the this keyword, watch out for that if you're using something called an arrow function, which we'll maybe talk about in other videos, but for now I'd recommend you use this route here. Okay, thank you.